Welcome back to the show today. Now, we are joined by one of the most notorious coaches in the CrossFit space, in competitive exercise. I am very excited about this one personally, never mind you guys. But welcome, Mr. Ben Bergeron. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me, Adam. I'm excited to be here.
So, first of all, let's just jump right into it. I always like going back to the start, especially with anyone I speak to. But you, like I said before, you're one of the most notorious coaches in the CrossFit space. Now, how did it start? How did the coaching, how did Mr. Ben Bergeron turn into Ben today?
So I fell into it. I was not, the plan was not to get into the fitness space. It was not to be a trainer. It was not to be a coach. I went to school for business, and when I got out of school, I went into finance, working in the city. I didn't realize how really ultimately unfulfilled I was with that pursuit until I got basically shook into my core. When the planes flew into the World Trade Center on 9/11, I took a deep internal dive into myself and realized that this is not, pushing money around the world, staring at a computer screen in a cubicle for 10 hours a day was not something that really truly fulfilled me. So I didn't know what that was, what I was going to do, but I was pretty inspired by the heroic acts of the days and the weeks that followed. So I thought I was going to join the military, potentially become a firefighter.
Yeah.
But I eventually ended up becoming a personal trainer as a way that I thought I was always into fitness. I was doing triathlons at the time. And I thought it was a way that I could have immediate impact in a really positive way. So I became a personal trainer. That led me to becoming a strength coach. And while I was a strength coach, I just fell into, I can remember the night I was there when I found CrossFit. And for the first time in about 5 years, I found a fitness organization that it made sense. For the first time, it wasn't about what triathlons were doing, which is like, how long can you go? And can you go longer? And it was out to Ironman distance triathlons. And the next thing was like, can you go longer? Can you go faster? Or it was about powerlifting and, or Olympic lifting. Neither one of those kind of fit the bill either. And when I found out about CrossFit, it just really resonated with this. Yeah, you have to have endurance, but you also have to have strength. You have to have fitness, but you also have to have skills. And that I was never a very good athlete at any one thing. So it's kind of spoke to my internal passions, and I fell in love with the community. Within 2 years, I opened up my affiliate, and 2 years after that, we were in our current location, and now it's 15 years later. So kind of spun up after that. We had some early success at the games. That's one of the things that really attracted me, the sport in the beginning, was that there was a competitive aspect to it. We went to the second or third games and did fairly well. And as a gym, we won the team competition within the first few years. And I started coaching some of the top 10 athletes, and then lucky enough to coach a couple of the individual champions. And it was right place, right time for sure.
When was the game success when it was team? Was that 2009?
So that was the first team that we brought to the games, but we won it in 2011, I think.
Yeah. One of the things you said there was about obviously 9/11, and I read something the other day about Elon Musk, and he got analyzed by almost like a shrink, and they said one of the great drivers for his success was almost like a traumatic event with his dad when he was younger. Is that something that you see with a lot of your athletes and people you train, like the most successful ones? Is it something in the childhood or a childhood experience that sort of spurs them on? Do you agree with that?
I think we all have that. I think everyone goes through that the common life cycle of growing up is when you're a kid, you think that your family's got it all together. And then there's that moment where you kind of realize like you don't. And that could be a driving factor for a lot of athletes. And I think that everyone's got their own internal drivers, which are unique to them. And whether it's, me working with Katrin, who won the games a couple of times, and, her being raised by a teenage mom. Her mom had her when she was 15 years old. That's certainly something that's could cause a lot of purpose in someone's lilife.
Almost that eureka moment.
Yeah. So I think you hit that moment and you realize, I don't think it doesn't need to even be a eureka, but there's that all of a sudden there's that idea of like, this is what I want. Like, this is what I want in my life. This is the direction I want to go. And I think it's really advantageous. And I hope that everyone gets that point where they have total clarity over what they want in their lives. Because most of us are just striving for what mom and dad, society, education has told us to drive towards. Get the BMW and the apartment in the city with the pretty girl and be able to take vacations twice a year. And that's success. And I just don't think that's success it certainly wasn't my definition of success.
Yeah, it's almost like a path that people feel like they have to take rather than what they actually should and want to do. What was Ben like in school, college? Obviously, you said you went into finance and stuff like that, but one of the things I think I've heard you say before as well is, especially when it comes to your athletes, talking about not just their intelligence in the gym and stuff like that, but how actually intelligent these athletes are outside of the gym. And I think I've heard you say something about Matt and something you said about Katrin, which I would have never knew or maybe assumed beforehand. What were you like?
I was a terrible student. I hated school. So I had dyslexia. And now I think there's tons of support for kids with learning disabilities. There was support for me, but I wore my lack of success as a identifier for me as a person. And I didn't like school, and it made me introverted to where I didn't have a big social life. That changed a little bit when I went to school, or to college, because I flipped to the other side and I became kind of like a partier in college, but still did not enjoy school at all. And because of that, I kind of thought I wasn't smart or going to be successful or a hard worker, when that wasn't the case at all. It was just that I didn't find something I was passionate about. And if I'm doing something, it's such a awesome litmus test for me now, is if this is something I should be pushing towards. If I'm disengaged, I have just no interest at all. I feel like everyone should have that feeling, like every day they're walking into a title fight that they want nothing more than to pummel the other guy on the other side of the ring. And that's the ferocity we should approach every day with. And when I am not feeling like that, it's the feeling of a fighter walking into a fight that they don't really care about the outcome. That to me is where I go, okay, this is not what you should be steering your life towards at all. And that for me was academics. Yeah. And when I was doing finance as well, but when I found fitness, I wanted nothing more than to learn more, read more, talk to the right circles, take the next certification, work on my business. And it became such an obsession and a passion that the flame grew so big. And it's not a matter of motivated or unmotivated. It's not a matter of energy or lazy. It's a matter of passion. It's a matter of wants.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree with that. I am going back to what you said earlier about the path. My dad built houses, and it was almost unwritten that because I did well in maths and I did well in another couple of subjects that I was supposed to be an architect. And it was almost like that is what you're going to do because you've got the grades to do that. But there was a certain core subject, graphic design, which I just couldn't get good grades no matter how hard I tried, how long I studied, but it was because I hated it. And I was too busy reading books and reading Muscle Nation because I thought that was the right platform to get information about the gym, and then reading stuff of like maybe the very, very early days of CrossFit, and then trying to find out about everything. And that was the stuff that I was taking in. It didn't matter how many hours in class that I was going to do that, because I wasn't passionate about it. I just was never going to do it. Um, One of the things that you said before was about being introverted, which can sometimes, especially if you've watched any YouTube videos of you, seen you on sort of CrossFit documentaries, it shocked me when I first read that you'd actually said that. But for someone who is such a successful coach, for someone who is such a successful leader in my eyes, if you are introverted, what kind of things can you do to shift, almost get your knowledge and get your points across? You know, you're speaking to Catherine as an introvert, and you might be used to working or chipping away alone, or you're speaking to Matt, or you're speaking to Chandler, or whoever it is right now. How do you produce, because you have the knowledge, but you have an introverted personality, how do you get that across?
Yeah, I don't think being introverted is a strength or a weakness. I think it's just a reality. And it can actually be used as a strength if you lean into it, because if I'm saying something, it's probably worth being said. And I'm just not rattling things off over and over again. Katrin used to say, when I would say something, there's kind of a joke, right? When I start working with an athlete, I give them kind of the first piece of feedback. A lot of times I'll say like, hey, I'm going to give you this feedback. If you don't take it, if you don't want it, you're telling me you don't want the feedback. So I'll stop. And I don't want to, there's two things of being like introverted is, it doesn't hold me back in my position because I like talking about things I'm passionate about. It's more about when I get in a big group and it's things that I'm not passionate about, that I'll just default to being a wallflower. I'll just kind of like be on the periphery of the group and just kind of take things in and listen. And that's cool because I can see the happenings and the way the group is forming and the shapes of all that stuff. But when it's time to lead or it's time to coach, I'm not introverted at all. I can be the biggest voice in the room because it's the role of who I am at that time. And I enjoy that role. I enjoy that role a lot. So the example would be if I'm having a CompTrain camp. So CompTrain is the platform that I run and own. And we have a bunch of camps where, 20, 30 athletes will come into town. And when I'm running them through the activities and the lectures and the coaching points, it flows. But when we go to break and now we're all having lunch together, that's where I just kind of like sit back and I don't feel the need or the desire to fill the gaps with empty words.
Yeah. So when you were coaching or maybe when you were personal training, I think everyone starts off one-to-one personal training first of all, and then maybe if you really sort of develop, you can open a facility or something like that. Was there ever any moment where you thought, I have maybe a unique eye for coaching or the way you speak to athletes? Who was the first athlete that you actually coached at maybe like a regional level or a games level or whatever it sort of was?
Yeah, my journey was really, for lack of better, it was really like organic. It just kind of grew. It just kind of happened because I was a personal trainer working with people one-on-one. And then I saw the limitations of that. There's only so many hours in the day. So there's only so many people you can work with and you can only charge so much. So basically your lifestyle is really capped very quickly. With the travel in between, you can only work with about 25 or 30 sessions a week.
Yeah.
So what I did was, this is before CrossFit, I just started putting people together. I was like, let's have all of you guys meet at 8:30. And now we could work with 6 to 10 people at a time. And that was a lot more fun for everybody. So that kind of led into the group dynamic. From the group dynamic, that led into CrossFit. During that process, I was meeting my wife And my wife was a top 10 individual games athlete. So she was my first athlete that I coached.
Right.
So lucky enough to work with some really high level athletes. And then I was playing the role of player coach on my team, who's finishing on the podium as well. And that just allowed some opportunities for me to work with some other athletes. The first one I worked with that wasn't part of my immediate community was Chris Spieler. Chris Spieler was on the podium, great athlete, great guy from Utah. And I worked with him, got to know him because I was working for CrossFit headquarters on the seminar staff. And so was he. So he reached out and was like, hey, want to do some coaching for me?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, cool. Didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but did some programming and then got to know him. And just from getting to know him, it lent more into the coaching aspect and like the psychological aspects of what it means to be a coach.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Obviously, you're a really big guy in mindset and looking into the mindfulness of sort of performance and athletes. Now, Weaponize Your Mind was something that was it's famous. Like if you know TED Talks and stuff like this, but I actually mentioned it to someone. I have my own facility, my own gym, and I mentioned it to a woman. I didn't say Weaponize Your Mind. I think that would have came across a little tad too strong. But what I said was, and what I used in my head was the set your sights thing. And she kind of came back to me and said, don't go on about that mindset stuff to me. That's just for athletes. I just want to come and train. Now, my question to you was, can you actually explain Weaponize Your Mind to maybe the person that can apply it to everyday gym going, the everyday athlete, maybe, your wife, your mom, whatever it is. So it can be applied every day. It's not just for games athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. There's three things that make up who you are. There's your mind, there's your body, and there's your energy. And the energy is a placeholder word for a lot of different things. People get the body part. Like it's just so obvious because it's physical. And if I go to the gym, I can lose weight. I'll be able to run a faster mile. I'll look better on the beach, and I'll be able to live longer, disease-free. Totally get it. When you talk about the mind, people go, whatever. It's just like, that's foofy. And it's disconnected. The body is about science and the mind is for mystics, right? It's for the gurus and the psychologists. And you only talk about the mind if it's messed up and there's mental illness. That could not be farther from the truth. And it's not two pillars, they're overlapping. And we know this. What you think about has a physiological effect on the body. My son came in the other night, he's 10 years old, came into the other night, in the middle of the night, into our bedroom, full sweat, panting, out of breath. In the middle of the night. He had been lying asleep in his bed, but now he's in a full dead sweat and completely out of breath. His heart rate is pegged at 180. From a dream. A dream is nothing except your thoughts. Your thoughts have physiological effects on you. Your body changes dependent on what you think about. You can know this. I mean, we all know this. If you start thinking about having to do giving a speech, Adam, you're going to give a TED talk next week. Okay, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, your heart starts to go. It happens it's just that idea of these things are not connected is for people that are really disconnected from themselves. So what we have to recognize is your thoughts. This is what happens. Your thoughts create emotions. It's not there's a trigger and an emotion in between those two things. So it's not I call you a bad name and you get pissed off. I call you a bad name and you have a thought about me calling you a bad name, which creates an emotion. Or I say something very flattering to you. I'm like, Adam, your abs look so great in that last Instagram post. You're like, you have a thought and you're like, aha, and you feel good. There's a trigger. From that trigger, there's a thought. That thought creates a emotion, and that emotion creates a physiological change in your body, which will then allow you to either have better performance or worse performance. That's the sequence. Trigger, step 1. Thought, step 2. Emotion, step 3. Physiological response, step 4. Improve performance, decrease performance, step 5. So let's back that up a little bit. If I can get you to feel better, I can improve your performance. That's how it is. Now, if you go into something, if you go into this interview, if you go into the gym, if you go into asking a girl out on a date, you go into any sort of event, and you are excited and curious, you're going to have a better outcome than if you are scared, full of doubts, anxious, stressed. And the reason for that is, if you are curious or excited, literally what happens in the body is your arteries and veins, the blood vessels, open up. It's literally what happens. They open up and allow for more transference of oxygen. They remove lactic acid faster. You become healthier. You literally become healthier. If you have bad thoughts, anxiety, doubt, fear, or stress, literally what happens, we can watch this happen under a microscope. The blood vessels constrict. You literally get sick.
So can you be two at the same time? Can you be excited like me for this podcast, but also nervous?
Yeah, no, yes. Actually, they're the exact same thing, but it's your thoughts that frame it. So what are you telling yourself about that feeling? So is it, I am so nervous? If you are, there's the downward cycle. If it is, I am so excited, now you have the upward cycle. It's the same deal. It's the same thing, but it's how you frame it. And what happens is you are sending yourself into one of two things. You're sending yourself into more of a sympathetic nervous system or a parasympathetic nervous system. If you are in the sympathetic nervous system, your immune system is being suppressed. If your immune system is being suppressed because now you are in a stressed state, really beneficial for us from an evolutionary biology perspective. We don't want to work on the pathogens and fighting off the viruses in our body. Let's send all of the energy and all of the blood to the working muscles so we can run away from the saber-toothed tiger. That's way more important right now. Acute stress, not chronic. Cool, that's good. But we don't want to be there all the time. What we want to do is spend most of our time in rest and digest. That's where the health happens. This is where we need our clients. This is where we need the person you were talking about to understand where they need to operate the majority of the time. If something happens, like you are their trainer and they walk in the gym and you say to them, we're going to do a 20 rep back squat today, a true 20 rep back squat. All of a sudden they go like, oh crap, like last time I did that, I did this weight and I failed and I only got to 16 reps and it was so hard. Like all of a sudden they're getting down into, they will not perform that 20 reps as well as if they go, okay, let's do this, Adam. Let's see what we got. I'm so excited to do this. And they frame it that way. Your thoughts become your words become your actions determine your performance. It's so important for us to figure out how to tell ourselves the right story all the time. This is the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people, bar none. It's it. It's how are you framing your life? That's it. If you have $1 billion, but you're angry, you're an angry person. It just doesn't, nothing else matters. If you live in Hawaii on the beach, but you have a super short, you get frustrated at everything super quickly, you're frustrated. If you have the best wife in the world, but you get stressed at everything that they talk, like you have a stressful life. It's not the surroundings we have, it's the stories we tell ourselves about those events. It's not even the events. So the example of that is I have 2 young kids. One of them loves nature. He loves watching nature shows, loves the whole ecosystem, the whole thing. So my son, when he sees a bee, is so curious and excited about the bee, wants to get like really close to it and see if he can see the fur on it and the how fast the wings are going, and see if he can see the eyes and all the things about a bee. My daughter, if she's there and sees the same bee, loses it, gets freaked out because she doesn't want to get stung, because she's been stung a couple of times and it really hurts. It is, one of them is super curious and excited. The other is full of stress and anxiety. They're both experiencing the exact same reality, but it's the conditioning of their past that is dictating different realities. What we need to be able to do, the weaponizing of our minds, is simply become aware of the stories we're telling ourselves. That's, if we can become aware of the stories, the narrative that's running through our head, which is not reality. It's just somebody narrating your life based off of the past experience we've had, not their fault. They're trying to protect you. That when I say they, it's the voices in your head, are just trying to protect you and or solve problems that don't exist. That's where the chatter comes in. If we can become super aware of that voice, we have the ability to use our mind not as the negative thing that causes stress, anxiety, fear, doubt, and lowers your immune system and causes sickness and becomes basically a slave to the thought process. Instead, it creates the freedom to live life as you want it to unfold. It's not that there's a bee there. It's that you're telling yourself a certain story about that bee. It's not that your boss said that to you. It's that you're telling yourself a story about what your boss said. It's not wrote on social media about you. It's a story you're telling yourself about what that person said about you. It's not that your wife asked you to take out the trash. It's the thing that you're telling yourself about the story that she said that. My wife is so controlling. She's always trying to do that. Dude, just let me live my life. Like, what? She's just asking you to take out the trash.
So can you have...
That's the weaponizing of the mind, is coming out of the matrix and recognizing that it's accepting reality. We are not victims. We don't need to be pessimists or optimists. It's not that this sucks or this is amazing. It's just accepting reality for what it is. There's a bee there. It's not good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Shakespeare said that. So what we need to recognize is that we can be excited when you have that feeling, like you said about the podcast. When I have that feeling about this podcast, it's not that I'm nervous about it. It's not that there's anything to be worried about here. I'm excited about this. That feeling inside of me is just me getting ready for this thing.
Right. So do you have more emotional people and people who are switched off to their emotions more? And I'm thinking of Catherine here as an example, because I've heard something you say before. Does that make someone a better athlete if they aren't even aware of it? Or is it the shift, what you did as a coach, of there is always going to be a thought, and if you can change it, that's when it happens?
Yeah. So the ideal state for an athlete is where there literally is no thoughts. That's called the flow state.
I can imagine Matt in his peak, he doesn't even care what's coming.
Yeah. It's just like everyone's experienced a flow state in their own kind of, maybe it's been very small, but we have it. It's where your best self just flows out. It just comes out and you lose total sense of time, right? Maybe it's sometimes you're giving a speech and all of a sudden words are just flowing out, or maybe you're writing a blog post and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. You don't have to worry about it. Or you're in the gym and everything is just clicking in the gym. Or it's, whatever, you're watching a sunset, or everyone's experienced that moment where it's just basically total bliss and your best performance can flow out of you. The fastest way to get out of that is judgment. So the fastest way to get knocked out of a flow state is by judging yourself. So this is where meditation is actually powerful. You can practice being in a state where you're not judging. That's basically there's a lot of misconception about what mindfulness and meditation are and is. And you can meditate doing anything. You can meditate in the shower. You can meditate driving your car. You can meditate walking in the woods. There's a lot of different, listening to music, whatever. It doesn't need to be sit down, cross-legged, palms up, eyes closed, staring at the sun. And the idea is, can you just sit for a little while and not judge? And that's what ends up being harder for athletes, is not judging when there's a lot on the line, not judging themselves when you can see athletes move ahead of you, right? That's real. All of a sudden, it's really hard not to go like, they're better than I am, because they're ahead of you. It's really hard not to judge when the event ends and you see that you got 19th place, but not judge. It's really hard not to judge yourself when the judge is telling you no rep. Much more difficult to not judge yourself. But this is Tom Brady in the fourth quarter being down by 2 scores and being just let the best self, like, I'm not nervous, I'm not anxious, I'm not stressed. It's just me chucking a football around a field. That's just it. Just like, let my best self come out. Our own judgments, mostly about ourselves, are our biggest hindrance, not only in sports, but in life. If there was one superpower that I could bestow upon humanity, it would be to let go of judging ourselves. And I am not immune to this. Like, I judge myself all the time, but I've also experienced those small times where you don't. And those times are amazing. If we could just narrow the gaps of the extreme judgment and widen the gaps where we're judgment free, which is what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is present moment, non-judgments with open-mindedness. That's all it is. So am I not judging anything? This is what people, when they meditate, they're like, I can't clear my mind. I can't, oh my gosh, there's still a thought in my head. Well, that's just judge. And like, I suck at this. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. I just want to open my eyes. It's like judge. Instead of just sit there and go, I want to open my eyes. That's okay. I can hear my thoughts. Okay, that's okay. Have those thoughts and just sit there in the moment, not judging it. The mind starts to travel to the future, which is what its job is. We are predictive machines. We want to predict the future. So what happens is, in an event, our athletes fall behind, and all of a sudden they want to predict, what does this mean? What does this mean for me and my future? Does this mean we're trying to constantly predict the future because it's what creates us? It's our survival mechanism. It's why we've rose to the top of the food chain, is because we are the best predictive machines. I don't want to say the best. Other animals are pretty darn good at it too, in terms of predicting. They're more in tune with nature than we are, but we're pretty darn good at it from a logical perspective. So that is what we're trying to do all the time, is to allow our athletes to experience as much of a flow state as we can. And the hack to it, the practice of it, is non-judgment, open-mindedness. The good and bad things are going to happen, and stay in this moment. Don't bring your past conditioning into it, and don't let the anxiety, stress, or fear of the future pull into it either.
So I know you are a big reader. Are books what would be your top 3 books, or that anyone could read to try and improve things like this? So maybe mindfulness, maybe meditation, maybe positive self-talk. What would you say?
Okay. Really good question. I'll try to give 3 in 3 bigger categories because these things could open the doorway to other things. The first one is almost like a prerequisite. Like everybody just needs to read this just to get like, is Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's just like, if you haven't read Mindset, I just think you're really missing on some really like foundational things. It's not anything earth shattering in mind, but you need that as a entryway. So that'd be Mindset by Carol Dweck. And then the next one would be, I would go with The Confident Mind by Nate Zinzer. It's a newer book. And I think it breaks down the framework really well. It breaks down what I just talked about in terms of thought, emotion, physiological response, and performance gain or loss. Mm-hmm. And then basically everyone kind of talks about like, well, confidence is earned. You get confident by doing well in things. And he kind of dispels that myth. And the third one would be in a totally different kind of realm, and it would be The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Takes it from more of a spiritual perspective, but it allows you to kind of understand, what the mind is doing and trying to do and what it's capable of and what it's not capable of, and the way we should be using the mind instead of the way the mind is kind of working for us by default.
Right. I think me and both Joe behind the camera are taking notes there. Definitely something to take away. But no, I'm excited. I think that second one as well, from what you said, is the first one that I need to go to. In the past, I have heard, and we've obviously been speaking about almost a mindfulness approach, but in the past, I've heard about you and different athletes talk about how you almost have this really straightforward, by the book scientific approach of an athlete has to be within a height range, or athlete has to be a certain degree of leanness. And I think this is the one that got people's backs up a little bit, but a certain level of body fat to be optimal. Not to be a games athlete, but to be optimal in their physique. But then also on the other side of Ben, you've got this whole holistic, I don't want to say Zen, but like the mindset approach. How did you sort of develop the best of both worlds? And are there any like must-have attributes that if someone comes to Ben as a semi-finals, obviously the semi-finals are coming up this weekend, what is the must attributes they have to work with Ben?
Okay. So there's those attributes as a elite performer in the CrossFit world. And then there's those attributes in order to be a happy, successful human being, healthy.
Okay. Yeah.
So from the CrossFit elite athlete perspective, it's like any sport. There's just some things that really benefit people. Now, you can see people on the fringes, but just like if you were going to create the attributes of any sport, Olympic rowing or swimming or basketball, there would be certain physical characteristics from age, height, weight, wingspan, speed, strength, all those things. And then, yes, leanness matters as well. So kind of, it just may fill in some of those blanks from a CrossFit athlete. We're looking for athletes that really the ideal age. We'll start with the big spectrum. It's basically 18 to 32 is the competitive age. If you're under 18, you're probably not going to be there. If you're over 32, you're probably not going to be there. But the real kind of like prime of an athlete is 24 to 29, that age group. For height, for guys, it's basically 5'8" to 5'10". You can be successful at 5'6", 5'7". You can be successful at 5'11", 6 feet. It's just harder. For weight, the ideal weight is around 190 to 195 pounds for guys. You can be successful at 180 pounds. You can be successful at 210. It's just harder. The ideal body composition is about 6 to 8, 9%. You can be successful being leaner than that at 4%. You can be successful being heavier than that at 10, 11, 12%. It's just a lot harder. So that's kind of the ideal. And we have the same thing for girls as well. And then in terms of the mental or the makeup or the characteristics that we look for there, the first one by far and away is work ethic. It's just, if you don't, I would much rather have a horse that I need to pull back on the reins because they just want to go, 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 than a horse I constantly have to be bucking and try to push out of the stable to go. So it's, if you're working with an athlete that you're like, and they just constantly want to be taking extra rest day or doing less, they're not going to make it. In our sport, they just won't make it. Enough talent in another sport, they might, but even with talent in our sport, they just won't. You won't get there. So the number one is by far and away is work ethic. The number two, I would say, is curiosity. They have to be interested in ways to get better. If they're constantly trying to, and this goes to Carol Dweck's thing of like a fixed versus a growth mindset. If they're trying to do everything, they're just constantly trying to prove how great they are. And they're not really interested in looking at how other people might be doing it better. They're not going to get there. So this is like when I worked with Matt Fraser, this is one of the things he did so well. The amount of film he watched, and he was constantly looking at he would figure out who was the best in the world at doing something that used to be seen as a throwaway movement, like GHD sit-ups, figure out their technique and implement it until he was one of the best in the world. And then he would figure out for rope climbs, he'd figure out for sprinting, and figure out he was so curious on how to figure out how to do that. And the next one would probably be, this one kind of sound weird, but you brought this up a little while ago. The third one would be intelligence. These guys are really smart. They're really, really bright. You have to be to figure out on the fly. So an example that Matt was he's a straight A student as an engineer at a really, good school. Katrin and Matt both, when I was training them, they were over at my house and they found a Rubik's Cube that my kids had that, of course, in my family had never been done. And they both were able to do the Rubik's Cube in under a minute. I was like, what the hell? How did you do that? And both of them answered at like the same time. They're like, it's just an algorithm. And this was like, 10 years ago. I'd never heard the word algorithm. It's like, So they're really bright. So we have those kind of like physical, anatomical makeup. And then you have the mental makeup of, curiosity, drive, and intelligence. And then there's the makeup in terms of, what skills and abilities are you bringing to the forefront. And I would rather have a strong and skilled athlete than a conditioned athlete when I'm first working with them. Strength takes years, if not decades, to build. Skill takes months and months, if not years, to build. Conditioning takes months, maybe a year to build. So that's the way I would look at the potential of working with an athlete.
Yeah. Would you actually test for, I don't want to say intelligence, because I suppose you can't be as direct at that, but maybe, is there anything if you had younger athletes or something like that? If you were, I don't know, a crazy teen was coming up through the ranks?
No, I wouldn't. You kind of like, if anything, you kind of, it's really, you kind of quickly really decipher that from certain athletes. Do they have that part of it? And actually, the other one that I kind of missed there is there's two other ones that are super, super important, and that is resiliency. So, and that's not only mental, but physical, like how do they come back from a setback, but also how susceptible to injury are they? And there's just some unlucky people, and you want me to say unlucky, maybe it's part of their genes or their genetics, or it might have to do with their history as athletes before. Maybe they had an eating disorder as kids, so now they have really fragile makeup and they get injured a lot. And the next one is adaptability. And this is one that people just don't recognize very well. If you and I do the exact same training program, you may see much, much bigger gains than I would. It's just some people respond to training incredibly, incredibly well and adapt super fast. Other people don't. They're just slow gainers. And that's one of the things that like Matt was that. Like Matt responded to training incredibly quickly. If you put him on kind of a focused movement thing for 2 or 3 weeks, he was basically like one of the best in the world super quickly, where other athletes like Katrin, that wasn't the case. Katrin had to grind and grind and grind and grind to make these tiny little incremental improvements.
That is crazy. That is crazy. It's nuts, especially when but both great successful athletes as well. So I suppose it gives a lot of people hope at whatever venture they are going for, that you can have the naturally gifted athletes. And I suppose Katrin obviously has that as well, but maybe not in the strength aspect and not in another aspect of sort of CrossFit. Now, let's talk about CompTrain for a sec. One of the things that I found out the other day, the local thing where I live right now is football. You know, when you have kids, or the go-to thing for me, my dad, he wants me to play for the local football team, and they have academies, and they have, you get like a trial or a scholarship. But you said something about a CompTrain academy, which blew my mind the other day, because I thought, actually, that is one thing that CrossFit has not really got, that every other sport in the world has got. Is this something, can you explain that? And is this something that you see is the future?
Yeah, so I do see it as the future. We're early right now. We started working with the business model. We started playing with it, and it actually, the way we wanted to roll it out, is not viable right now. So it is something I think is going to come down the pipeline, but until there's a little bit more interest in the sport. So here's I thought that the tipping point for the sport was going to be a year or two ago. And then we had some setbacks. For sure. First one being COVID. So actually, I'll back up, not even being COVID. The first one being where they moved the open from the traditional, it's in February, to they moved it to November. And that rocked the open. Now there's 2 opens. People didn't sign up. It went from almost 500,000 people to almost half of that, like 250,000. So that was a big disruption to the space. Then you follow that up with COVID. And now people can't go into gyms to do the open. There's no community to actually do it with. And now it's like, and also we switched it back to February. And then we have these 2 COVID years. And then at the tail end of that, we have the issues with leadership at the top, and the whole, CrossFit crisis with, involved in the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the rest, and new ownership coming in. And that's what I thought we would be ramping up past those. Instead, we've taken massive hits back, and we're trying to get back to square one. And we're just kind of not quite there yet. So we haven't had the exponential growth in the space that I was anticipating. And because of that, I think anybody trying to do a very professional level academy is going to have to run it in the red for a while, because the funding the economics don't make sense yet.
Yeah.
So either the athletes, you're going to have to get some really special athletes that are willing to just pay to be there, or you're going to have to find some really interested organizations and companies that want to sponsor it. And what we found when we did that was we're not there yet. So we'd like to do something like that, but the totality of it is on hold until there's the next level of interest in the sport.
Nice, right. Well, I'm hoping that if I have a little boy or a little girl, my height gets offset from my partner's and it knocks off about 5 inches from him, and he might have a chance of coming over to CrossFit New England.
Love it.
Many of the best athletes in the world, like Chandler and Amanda and stuff like that, they probably say you are a hugely influential person in their life. But who was one of the most influential people in your life, or a couple? Who do you have to sort of thank?
Yeah. So obviously my parents, that's a big one. My dad was very level-headed and very had a lot of common sense. And because of that common sense, he did well in business. And he's always talked to me about business. So I think that's something that's massively influenced me and given me a little bit of a foundation to work off of, where I think a lot of other people in the fitness space found it through a passion for the physical body and performance, and didn't have as much of the business mindset. So that's something I'm definitely grateful for. My mom's super loving as a caretaker. So definitely influence from them. And then the interesting thing is I never had a true mentor. I never had even another coach that I looked up to, because I never excelled at sports. So I never got great coaching. I was always very average at basically anything I put my foot forward into. So the coaches and the people that I've looked up to have always been from afar. It's been through books. My mentors are authors. And the biggest one that I've been probably most influenced by is twofold. I'll go three. One is Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I found that book at the right time, at the right place, right as I was starting my coaching career in my business. And I think it's the most foundational book that I think if you just read that book every year, you'd be killing it.
Yeah.
Then the next one is John Wooden. John Wooden won multiple, I think 10 or 11 national championships in basketball in a row, and had a very character first mindset in terms of the way he built his players and his coach and his team. It was all about doing the right things the right way for the right reasons, and was massively influenced by that. And the next one that kind of just like really resonated with me was Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Really just foundational approach to life. And those three kind of mentored me and opened a lot of doors to a lot of other things.
Yeah. So you said you didn't really excel at sport there, or didn't really excel at any sort of sport, but you've still done Ironmans and still completed Ironmans and stuff like that. Was it for someone who maybe, if it was a genetic profile or if it was maybe your physical attributes that maybe let you down, is it the sort of your mindset and the way you channel sort of killing the critic that's pushed you through stuff like that?
I don't know the answer. I've always wanted to, even as a young kid, I was very interested in limits and very interested in discipline, creating freedoms. So I've always liked two things, like boundaries and then finding a limit. What I mean by that is like Iron Man and those type of things. I liked seeing what I wanted to. So I wanted to do a triathlon to see if I could do a triathlon. I could do a triathlon. So I went up to the next and I tried to do an Olympic distance, and I wanted to do a half Ironman, and I did an Ironman. It was like, okay, can I qualify for Worlds? And so I was always trying to get to that next thing and try to see what I was capable of. But again, I never did it at a world-class level, not at anything close. And then from the discipline perspective, I've always been really interested in that as a kid. I didn't smoke, drink, or do drugs or anything like that all the way up until I was 18, because I liked that black and whiteness of it. I liked the binary, like either I do it or I don't. And then when I turned 18, I did it. And then similar to that is from the age 25 to 35, 10 years, I wasn't planning on it. I didn't have a sweet, a dessert, a baked good, a piece of bread, for 10 years, because I just liked that discipline of that. And it was just, it actually became easy. I really mean that, because it's like, if you know you don't smoke cigarettes, it's actually easy not to smoke cigarettes. It's really easy not to smoke cigarettes. What's really challenging is when you smoke cigarettes sometimes, and you smoke cigarettes only at parties, or only if enough people go on a smoking break at lunchtime, and that's what people do with sweets. That's why it's so hard, because I only do sweets on special occasions, at birthday parties, or if I'm out to dinner, or if somebody brings something over to the house, or if everyone else there is having it, and now every single time there's something put in front of you, it's another decision point, and that's exhausting. So to me, I really just love it's why I like time restricted eating now, intermittent fasting. It's so much easier for me to just say, I'm not going to eat before noon, than it is to try and weigh and measure some food and pay attention to quantities here and there. If I just know that these are the things that I do and these are things I don't, I love that binary aspect of the regimented discipline, which allows me so much freedom and mental space to put my energy elsewhere.
No, definitely. I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting as well. One of the things what I was resonating with you there was about almost like pushing the limits a little bit. Now, I've signed up to a triathlon. It's going to be my first one in July, and I think that I may want to do Ironmans in the future, but kind of having a bit of a positive self-talk, positive sort of, I'm quite good at the swimming, and I would like to think that I am, and I'm quite good at the bike, but every time I go to a running session or a running track, that is when my little demons come out a little bit, and I've not had that in a long time. I sort of do CrossFit for fun and to stay healthy, but I've not really had that sort of challenge. So getting that for the first time back, I think it does improve mental toughness, doesn't it? It sort of gets you in that struggle, causes adaptation a little bit, doesn't it?
I love it.
Yeah, this last year, I've definitely think I've improved all around, just in day-to-day life, just because I've got that challenge again of like something plucking away at me and trying to get me out of my comfort zone.
We are here to evolve. Like I believe that's our purpose in life, is to raise up humanity as a totality thing. The only way we can do that is if each of us individually evolve. The only way to evolve is through challenge, through struggle, through hardship. If you are a sloth on a couch, there's no evolution. It doesn't happen. So you trying to do things that are pushing you a little bit is the greatest thing that you can do for yourself. It will change you physically, mentally, spiritually, in every which aspect. The thing we want to do as we're going through those challenging things, which, by the way, when you bring life through that prism, all we should be doing then is having more and more experiences. Like, your life is an accumulation of experiences. Now, sometimes those experiences stack on top of each other. Like if you meditate every day, those stack on top of each other. But also cool is you going off and doing a triathlon. That's not a stacking thing. It's you getting outside your comfort zone to do this thing over here. Super cool. You'll evolve a ton in either those special, unique, acute things or the chronic, everyday ritual things. Both those things are so beneficial for us, but they have to challenge us. Once they don't challenge us anymore, we need to bump up to the next level. We find that next sliver of a challenge. If you bump up too high, you no longer are challenged, you're in struggle. And we don't want to be in struggle. That's you, instead of signing up for a triathlon, you signing up for an Ironman. We don't want to do that, because then we're going to do is we're actually going to, it's going to be too much of the stimulus. And we just need the appropriate amount of stimulus. And what we need to do is when you go to the track, it's just as what we were talking about before. Your job at the track is not to run the full distance. It's not to finish in a certain speed. Your job at the track is simply to become aware of the judgment in your head. That's it. Can you let go of that judgment? Because the only reason you don't like it is because you're used to excelling at other things. So you have this expectation that I am awesome. I am one that people look up to. I have so many followers on Instagram. I am a leader in the fitness space. I am supposed to do really well at this. If you let go of all that expectation, when you go to the track, you know what you do? You run. You run right at your physiological tolerance, not your psychological tolerance, which is lower than your physical. You're putting an imaginary ceiling on your ability that does not exist, but it is so real because you've limited yourselves through judgment. The job at the track is to get rid of the critic in your head. That's it.
Yeah, that is so true. It's I suppose everyone as well. This relates to just everyday people coming to the gym. One of the main most frequent things we have in the gym is as soon as someone walks through the shutters is, oh, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of being here. I was so scared to come here. And the second they get in, even if they really aren't capable of doing much at all, breaking it down to not really a lot of skill, not really a lot of physical abilities, they're fine once they actually get in. So I can definitely relate to that, and so many people can too. It's a super exciting time of year right now because obviously semi-finals in CrossFit World are kicking off. What do you think of the workouts first of all?
So there's each semifinal has usually around 6 or 7 events, and 2 of the events are common across all of the regionals.
All right.
Or regionals, semifinals. That's an old school. And one of those is a barbell complex, 3 cleans into 2 snatches into 1 jerk. As far as the strength test goes, I love it. I think it's one of the coolest, best strength tests there will be. Some athletes will choose to power clean, others will squat, tons of stamina, testing all the cool things. The strongest people will win, but it also makes it super exciting in terms of it's not just they're getting ready to snatch and it's over. It's like each event is there's so many opportunities for excitement and drama. So love that one. The next one is 10 legless rope climbs, 15 feet with a 180-foot run in between. This was taken from an old regional event, and by itself as a test, it's cool. Both those events are cool. I just think it's weird that they chose those 2 events because to me, I would want to create 2 events that create a really good story that I could tell about, like who's going to be exciting to watch at the games, who's like a contender. And neither one of these tell me who a contender is. They tell me very specialized skill sets.
Yeah.
If they were to do a workout like a 400-meter run, 21 chest to bar pull-ups, 15 burpee box jump overs, and 9 muscle ups. All of a sudden, like the winner of that is going to be like, okay, that's a contender. So I don't know. I wish that they had chosen a little bit more of that. But having said that, the programming that the individual semifinal event leaders have created are really good. So, I mean, they're coming up with some really, really good ones, particularly the MAC, which is in Tennessee this year in 2 weeks. I think that one is very, very well programmed.
Right. So when you've got athletes who are, I don't want to say guaranteed, but almost expected to qualify for the games, like Chandler, like Sam, like Amanda, do you, as their coach, break them down? Do you even have to look at those or do you just carry on with training as normal?
No, we very much prepare for these. We don't take the semifinals for granted at all. We are not peaking for these the way we would for the games, but that just has more to do with the type of fitness, because there's more volume at the games and the amount of taper that we do leading up to it. But in terms of the focus that we give to the workouts that we know, in terms of the focus that we give to the outside of the competition, things like sleep and travel and nutrition, we're giving as much focus to those as we would the games themselves.
Is there any sort of surprises or anything that you think could happen in the semifinals? Is there any big outbreaks that you can expect to see certain athletes?
The honest answer to that is I don't pay enough attention to a media person would have a lot more insight than I would on that. I'm really focused on the athletes I got. So I actually don't even know who the up and comers are.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. Now, the only thing that I don't think I've really touched on, which I would love to know as well, is the business side, CrossFit New England. So am I right in thinking, do you have the one CrossFit New England, or do you have multiple gyms right now?
Yep. So there's one CrossFit New England, and I'm the owner of that. That's my baby. That's the thing that I pour all of my daily passion into. I just got done doing the workout there and coaching a class. And then hustled over here to chat with you. And then I do have another 6 gyms that I own as in a partnership with 2 business partners. And those are called CrossFit Tilt.
That is amazing. Well, one of the questions was how hands-on are you with the gym these days? But I think when you're still coaching classes as a busy man.
So for the gym, I'm very hands-on. We have awesome people that work both as from the coaching perspective and on the administrative side. But for the CrossFit Tilt gyms, I'm there to help get the boots off the ground. Establish some systems and some culture, and then I'm totally hands off from the day to day.
No, that's awesome. My last question, which you obviously went into a little bit earlier, what would you give for advice to someone who maybe wants to open a gym, that maybe is stuck in a financial job or an architecture job, or a job that they're not happy with, and they want to branch out, they want to do this, they want to tackle their own gym?
Yeah. Make sure it's what you truly want to do from a passion perspective, because from the outside looking in, when you crunch the numbers, it looks like a very profitable business opportunity. They're not. Very few of these gyms, and I don't mean just CrossFit gyms, F45s, Orange Theories, CrossFit gyms, very few of them are very profitable. The way to become, if you're moving for a business opportunity, I don't think it's the right move. If you're doing it because you love it and you're passionate about creating an amazing experience for each individual member, it's the way you want to spend your day-to-day is in the gym, building community and honing the skills of your coaches, there's no better job in the world. But to think that you are going to make 6 figures doing this, you're not. The only way to get to 6 figures is the most common way to get there is by opening up several units. But what happens is, as you open up several units, you then get removed from the day-to-day of it, and you lose the whole thing I just talked about the passion thing. But think about it in terms of each of these gyms, making 30 or 40 grand a year. That's about it. Now, if you open up a second one, you had someone to manage that one. There goes the 30, 40 grand. It's gone. So you need to open up several of them to get to that 6-figure income. So my advice would be to go into it for the right reasons. And the right reasons are connection, community, coaching, changing lives.
Yeah, no, that's so good to hear from you, because I think one of the most common thing when people pay for drop-in sessions in Newcastle, if they're not from the area or something like that, is people, when they see me, think that I'm not going to be there because I have a few followers now. And it's sort of like, oh, he's actually here or something like that. But no matter if I don't know, if I'm tired, if I've got a headache, if I'm a little bit sick, I would be happy sitting on a box in the gym, just being like, oh, let's see if Sarah can get kip and pull ups for the first time, because it's like Thursday and she's tried 6 weeks in a row. This might be the week. And I think someone who is passionate will always outwork, because it doesn't feel like work, someone who's doing it for, business or financial.
Said so well.
Yeah. But I'm not going to take any more of your time, but that was absolutely amazing. I have really enjoyed just listening. I would come and chat with you just like this anyway, never mind doing a podcast. So I really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and everyone else, all the listeners. But where can everybody find Ben and CompTrain? Because I want to give you a little plug, because I have done a lot of the workouts in my early CrossFit days just from the newsletter, and it is so sick.
Yeah, very cool. So mine is, unfortunately, the easiest place to find me is Instagram. It's just Ben Bergeron. And then CompTrain is comptrain.com. Easiest place to kind of get into the programming, the community of what we do.
Awesome. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Again, thank you again for coming, Ben. And hopefully a couple of years might do one of these again, have something more to chat about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam.
Perfect. That's a wrap.